So tell me a little bit about your experience with the documentaries for the Titanic and your job with that at that time.
Okay, well, I was hired by Bob Anderson, who is the president of Classic Worldwide Productions in Ohio, and he was hired by the Discovery Channel and the Infirmer organization from France to do a number of different things. We collected archive high definition video of the Titanic expedition in '96. Through my control room, I sent pictures to Discovery Online, as well as probably 2 or 3 cruise ships that were out there with us that paid to see the expedition in real time. But they had to stay 2.5 miles away from us, obviously because of the launches and everything. But we had microwave hops to all of those ships. And not only did we have live video going to them about 18 hours a day, but we had the opportunity of interviewing a couple of the original people that were on the Titanic, which of course have long since passed away.
So when you were gathering that video, were you setting submersives down there as well?
I had access to every piece of video that came from the submersible. Now, the submersible, of course, is 2.5 miles down. And at the time, we were using a classified system that was classified by the French Navy that was called TIVA, which, believe it or not, sent live, real-time color, full motion pictures from 2.5 miles down to the surface.
Okay, wow. So with your expertise, I would say with submersibles, what do you think could have happened to this particular?
Well, I don't think people realize how dangerous going to that depth in the ocean is. It's just as dangerous as going to the moon. And in fact, maybe even more so. I think we probably know more about going to outer space than we know going to really deep depths in the ocean. And it's proven by the fact that there's only about, or at least the time that we were diving, there were only about 4 or 5 submersibles in the world that could even reach that depth. And as far as what happened, you know, I've kind of been speculating, and of course it's all speculation, but there's a number of things that I thought about. First of all, there's a lot of wreckage down there. And when we first visited the Titanic, I actually had to capture images of wreckage that had been left by the submersible that was being used by James Cameron to photograph down there. And it was a very serious thing. The cowling, or the covering that covers the screw of the submersible, was knocked off right over the Marconi room. So we brought that to the surface. But as far as what could have happened on this expedition, it could have been a catastrophic failure of the submersible itself. I understand it was made of some sort of a composite material. It could have gotten stuck in the wreckage, since there's so many things to run into down there. It could have been a control misfunction. It could have been a number of things. So anyone is going to speculate about it, but when I heard what happened, I was not optimistic about any good outcome from this.
Why is that? Just because you know the dangers of going that deep and the dangers of submersibles?
Yes, the pressures at that depth are 6,000 to 7,000 pounds per square inch. And just to give an example, I brought something along. I sent souvenirs to my friends where I took a 12-inch or 12-ounce coffee cup, and I sent it down to the deck of the submersible, and it came up like this.
Wow.
So the pressures just crush everything. Also, the temperature down there is absolute zero, or not absolute zero, but it's 0 degrees centigrade. And so that's a challenge, because unless you've got a very good heated vehicle, it gets cold very quickly. The submersible we were using had many really fine safety features built into it by Captain P.H. Nargile, who was on the expedition I was on, and apparently he's the pilot of this submersible. He's probably one of the most experienced deep sea expeditionary people in the world. he's been on at least 6 expeditions for the Titanic, and then he's been on probably hundreds and hundreds of other deep sea explorations. But he and the Infamer team from France built into the submersible some interesting technology. If they lose all control of the vehicle, it dumps ballast immediately. That brings it to the surface, but it still takes about an hour to get to the surface from that depth. So, you know, if they had similar safety measures on the vehicle that they were using, and it was under something and it tried to rise up to the surface, just think of a balloon that a helium balloon that lets you go in the living room, and it goes up to your ceiling and it stops. And that's as far as it's going to go. So it could have got stuck in the wreckage. It could have had a catastrophic failure. Who knows?
So you know Captain Nargeolet.
Yes, very well.
So when you're hearing that he is on this vessel, what's going through your mind?
Well, the first thing I thought of when I heard of the incident was, I sure hope that PH Nargeolet is on this expedition, because he's going to know what to do. And it was pretty shocking to me when I found out that he was one of the 5 in the submersible.
And so, I mean, do you feel, when you say something catastrophic might have happened, do you feel like because of his experience, there must be something out of his control that happened?
Yes, and I'm a little bit surprised that with a mission as risky as this, and of course we had lots of backup when we were out there for about a month, but the thing that surprised me is that they didn't have some sort of a secondary vehicle, although it's very expensive. It cost about $250,000 per dive to even do it. But that they didn't have some sort of an emergent, well, I'm sure they had emergency measures, but apparently whatever happened pretty quickly. It was only down an hour and 45 minutes, which means the submersible had just reached the Titanic about 45 minutes earlier, and it had navigated around to the front side or the bow of the ship. And after that, they had no more communication. So whatever happened says to me it happened pretty quickly.
See, just, you know, in the last few hours today, a robot found some debris, a debris field near the Titanic that could be linked to this, to the missing Titan. Have you heard about that? And does that kind of go along with what your theory is on what might have happened?
Well, I haven't been following it minute by minute, but I heard about the robotic vehicle. Usually they call it a Robin or something like that. We had several of them on board the vessel, and also there was one tethered to the submersible as well. But I understand that they sent that down with the capability of having a cable to connect to the submersible if they found it, because they can't lift the submersible. I think it's 22,000 pounds. They can't lift it with the robotic or the robot, but they can hook a cable to it, and then it could be lifted to the ship, because they can't open the vehicle until it gets to the surface.
So whatever this robot is, that I'm reading the AP copy right now, but whatever this robot is, you're saying that they put something that it can link to this debris and pull it up to the surface?
Right. They would hook a cable to it, and then they would hoist it to the surface.
And would that take roughly an hour and a half, like it would, like the descent down to the Titanic?
It's hard to say. Everything takes longer than you expect. You probably remember that when we were there in '96, we were attempting to lift a 1,700 pound, or was it, no, 17-ton piece of the hull. And we got it all the way to the surface, and we ran into the back end of a hurricane, and we lost it, and it went down. And 2 years later, in '98, the colleague that was with me on the Titanic went out with the Dateline crew from NBC, and they did a special on the raising of that piece. So, it is possible to raise things, but it takes an awful long time. It took 5 days just to hook up that piece of hull to bring it to the surface.
You've speculated on what could have happened. Let's talk about the dangers a little bit more of an expedition like this, especially, for tourism.
Yes. Well, a lot has improved in technology, obviously. When we were diving on the Titanic, they had a special system, which is still probably pretty classified, that had put transponders, acoustic transponders, at different places around the wreck of the Titanic. Because once you get to that depth, well, once you get to probably 70 or 80 feet, it's pitch black. And when you go down 2.5 miles or 12,000 feet, there's just no light whatsoever. And light seems to be absorbed by anything you do. We brought the most powerful lights that had ever been taken to the Titanic. We had 5 towers of 2 million candle power each installations to light it so that we could take photographic images. But one of the dangers, I think, is the fact that if they had any kind of navigational, I think they were navigating by sonar. I don't know how accurate that is, but there's so much stuff down there kind of hanging off the ship. And as you know, these rusticles are eating the ship and it's deteriorating at an amazing rate. And I said to my wife last night, I said, you know, anything could have fallen over even while they were there. Again, it's speculation, but I think the dangers in trying to navigate that are probably similar to what happened to the Russian Mir when they went down in '96 trying to photograph, and they didn't have the technology that we were working with the Inframer group, and so they ran into part of the Titanic's Marconi room.
So, I mean, what you saw in '96 would be very different than what they're seeing even today. So, you know, on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis, the side of the Titanic is very different and would making it difficult to really navigate.
Well, since I went down, I understand Cameron or somebody has actually 3D mapped the entire ship and now has it in a virtual reality. And actually, we were working in a similar situation, but very, very more crude than that, because we had transponders that we could kind of tell where we were, and we could use lights on the submersible to see. But even with the most powerful lights on the submersible, we could only see 3 to 4 feet.
Do you think the company should be taking submersibles down into the depths of the ocean, you know, for sightseeing?
I don't think that's for me to say. You know, everybody wants to monetize the things that people want. And obviously there's a waiting line of people with $250,000 a ride to see the Titanic. And if they want to do that, that's fine. And, you know, it's regrettable that this incident has happened. But when you think about space travel, we've lost a lot of lives attempting to do space travel, not only in outer space, but right on the ground with rockets blowing up and so forth. So I think it's just a calculated risk that you have to take when you're going into business to provide a service. And I'm sure whatever happened in this expedition is just going to add to the backlog of information and data they have of what to do and what not to do.
If they're able to find this vessel, do you feel like anyone would be alive?
No.
Just because of the conditions and the amount of time they've been down there?
Well, the things that they don't bring up is even in the submersible we were using that went down for 8 to 10 hours a day, you have to remember there's no bathrooms. Okay. So whatever you do gets done right in a very confined area and held in a bucket until you come up. Breathable air is one issue. The coldness of the ocean is another issue. And I hate to say it because all of those people are precious lives, but I don't see any way that they could survive past, you know, the time that the oxygen ran out.
Do you think that there's something that we can learn from all of this in the end?
What was the question again?
Do you think that there's something that we'll be able to learn from all of this, a tragedy like this?
Well, whenever you become an expert in an area, it's because you've made more mistakes than your competitors. You know, it's like when you go to school. If if you knew everything, you wouldn't have to go to school because you didn't make any mistakes. So we learn by our mistakes, and I'm sure the company will learn from what has happened.
Okay, so have you always been in Lynchburg, based out of Lynchburg, Bruce?
Since 1978, when I came here to head up the Jerry Falwell operations.
Okay, so it's been a bit.
Well, that was back in, yeah, 78. And I worked there for 5 years. And then I had my own television production company for another 25 or 30 years. And then I went back to Liberty as the vice president of new media and technical operations right after Dr. Falwell died. And
Okay.
then I left there. I retired for good let's see, I don't remember what year it was, but it was about 8 years ago.
So how did you get involved with making documentaries about the Titanic? Just as a job, or were you fascinated with it as well?
Well, I was making documentaries all over the world. I'm a live television director, and you know what that's all about.
Yeah,
You
I
don't
do.
go back and edit it. So I've done thousands of programs all over the world, from Japan and China and Europe and Russia and all over the place. And so I've done about every type of everything from musicals to documentaries to wedding videos to corporate videos. You do a little bit of everything to keep bread on the table.
Yeah. So basically, when that live feed was coming up, you were the director. Like at a television news program, we have a director that's hitting the buttons, showing what video is coming up next. That was how you were involved in that project?
Yes, I started directing television out in Los Angeles in 1969. And I directed all kinds of programs there, sports programs, all kinds of events. And I originally started in Los Angeles as an engineer for NBC television. And then during the Olympics, I went over to ABC television. And from there, I had gotten married and my wife wanted to move back to Florida. So we did that, and we were there for several years. And then we moved up to Lynchburg, Virginia, and we've been here ever since. So I actually call this home.
Okay. One more thing before you go. Knowing PH Nargelet, I mean, what can you tell us about the person that he was, the sort of captain he is, that kind of give us kind of a personal outlook into him.
Well, he was a very humble but very professional and experienced person. Safety was uppermost in his mind. That's why I said to my wife, I sure hope he's along on this expedition, because if anyone could pull something off, he could. He's a family man. His wife lives in the United States, and my colleague, Bob Anderson, knows him very well. And of course, I interfaced with him on a daily basis. Several of the videos that I produced show him in my control room, sitting there working with some of the other crew. We ate meals together. He was very soft-spoken, but he just impressed me as a tremendously experienced and professional guy.